Coming to you live from the city of Port Phillip. Welcome to tonight's episode of Marcus Pell Talks, where it's all about what's happening locally in the city of Port Phillip and in politics in general in the fine state of Victoria and our wonderful Commonwealth of Australia. Tonight, we're talking about the city of Port Phillip budget, and I'll be joined by Andrew Bond and Greg Day very, very shortly. But whilst we're here, let's just run through some of the key components of the City of Port Phillip budget and where we're at. No, not yours budget necessarily in terms of your home budget, but this is your local council budget, and it just dropped last night at a council meeting. This is the draft budget that goes out for your consultation, and the council's looking for your opinion on this. And a spoiler alert, ladies and gentlemen, yes, rates are going up, but that's not just the headline. When you dig into the fine print, into the 2025 budget numbers, it isn't just about those numbers. It's about priorities, the pressure points, and of course, the politics amongst the councillors. One thing that's going to cause friction around the council chamber and behind the scenes is the big picture of this budget. Council revenue is expected to jump from $271 million to an enormous $286.6 million. That's a 5.6% increase in total revenue at the City of Port Phillip this year. Greg Day, Andrew Bond, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having us again, Marcus.
Let's go through some of the numbers, the key numbers in the City of Port Phillip budget that came out. Here's some of the numbers that aren't in the budget but are all about the budget. The budget itself is an enormous document. It's 350 pages long. It's a budget, and it's also the council plan that outlines the priorities of this council really for the next 4 years, but technically for the next 10 years, which I think is too long, but that's beside the point. There's 83,136 words in this document. That is an enormous amount. In fact, if you compare it to a Harry Potter book, it's just fewer words than the Chamber of Secrets in the Harry Potter series. So I don't know how you tell an organisation where to head with this sort of document and easily communicate it, because there's a lot in there to read. And lucky you, we've got Greg Day here tonight who's done the reading for us, because I can tell you, Andrew and I have had a summary look into this, but Greg's gone through the absolute details of some of these numbers. And here are some of the high-level numbers which we've picked out, which were of interest to us. We'll go through more granular details in a moment. But as I said before, the headline rates increase that's been advertised by council is 3%. And that's true. But the total rates revenue that equates to means the council budget is up almost 5%. So the money that the City of Port Phillip gets from rates and charges revenue has gone from 151 million to 158 million year on year. That's almost a 5% increase. Your waste charge, which is separated out from your rates fee, is going up an enormous 13% from $15 million to $16.8 million. There's some other charges here. Parking fines are budgeted to go up from $21 million to $23 million, which is just under 8%. Parking fees aren't going up pretty much at all. They're pretty much flat year on year.
Marcus, just a correction. I think you've got those two lines the wrong way around. The parking fines should be the top number and parking fees should be the second number.
Oh, thanks for the clarification, Andrew, and apologies. I will change that before we go to a break.
Yeah, so parking fines are basically unchanged, but parking fees are going up a whopping 7.75%.
Sorry, the fees are going up. Pardon me. Thank you for noticing the error live on air instead of before the show. I appreciate that. So total revenue is up 5.6%. When you put all of that together from a budget point of view, that's a very large increase. So albeit you're hearing everywhere that your rates are going up 3%, the actual reality is the budget impact is that this Port Phillip Council has almost 6% more money to spend than it did last year. Employee costs are going up just under 7% to $117 million. Services are going up 9%, which means total expenditure is increasing by about 5.24% in the budget documents. A pretty small increase in FTE headcount, just under 3%, to a total number of staff at 842 staff is the budget for the end of the year. Some other tidbits to have a look at before we get into the discussion with Andrew and Greg. And Andrew, thanks you again for that pull up of that error. I appreciate that. Let's go through some of the line items here that might be of interest to you. St Kilda Festivals got cut by $450,000. That's a sting. And on the other hand, we've seen some increases, $250,000 for social inclusion, loneliness programs, and anti-discrimination work, $60K for a multicultural strategy, $250,000 for ongoing community safety actions, $200,000 to clean up streets, literally pressure washers on the pavement, $400,000 from more for urban forest plans, $15,000 a year for Friends of Sawai, which is now going to be running to 2030. That had previously been taken out of the budget. $9,000 a year for the Wild at Heart Songwriting Therapy Initiative. There's a lot in this budget. It's gone out to a public consultation now from the 17th of April to the 18th of May. There's a lot in here. Who wants to start us off first? Andrew, what were your views on this?
Look, you've mentioned a lot of the fees and charges where the rates income's going up nearly 5% in a rates environment of 3% rate capping. The parking fees was another shock. I've gone through them line by line, and they're going up by nearly $2 million in parking fees, or 7.7%. Other user fees are going up by about $2 million, or 9.3%. But one of the biggest stings is the waste charge going up by nearly $2 million, and it's going up by over 13%. This was something that was probably always going to occur once you remove the waste charge from the rate capping environment.
Andrew, can you quickly and simply explain that to people?
Well, last year or a couple of years ago, the City of Port Phillip removed waste from its rates environment and applied a separate waste charge. And in the first year, the cost of the waste charge was directly offset by exactly the same amount in a reduction in your rates. But now rates are only allowed to go up by the rate cap, which this year is 3%. So the council cannot put your rates up by more than 3%. But the waste charge, which is now sitting outside of the rates cap, can go up by whatever amount council wishes to put it up. And this year that is going up by over 13%. And that was raised many times during the discussion over the waste charge. And I think you and I, Marcus, continually voted against this, that once it was outside the rates capping environment, you would see it go up by considerably greater amount than what the rates cap is for the remainder of council's
just to clarify, I think there was only 2 councillors that voted against it at the time.
I think there were only 2 councillors who voted against it every single time it came up, Marcus, and I think that might have been you and I.
Yeah,
everyone else, every other councillor supported it because they thought there was some sort of short-term sugar hit to people who live in big houses, that this was going to be really good for those that live in big houses, and they were going to start saving. Well, now we're into about year 3 of this particular program. They're going to see their waste charge go up by 13%, and I think it'll be a standard over the next few years, is that waste charge will go up by 10+% year after year after year as we go throughout the term of this council.
What else did you get out of it, Andrew?
Look,
it's
complicated. I know it's very complicated, but the one that stuck out for me was the efficiency dividend. While we were on council, Marcus, we always had a 1% efficiency dividend. Every department had to find 1% savings year on year in order to make their department more efficient. That's now been dropped from 1% to 0.7%. So it's no longer, finding efficiencies within each department is no longer going to be as big an issue as it was over the previous terms of council. I think it's been the last 8 years where we had a 1% efficiency dividend. It's now been dropped to 0.7. So they're not chasing the savings and efficiencies that they once were. And when you see the way the other fees are going up, when you see the way the spending has occurred, I guess at least the councillors are being upfront with the community that they're not out there finding savings and efficiencies, and that's no longer a priority for them.
Greg, let's bring you in here. What was your view? We'll come back to it in a minute, Andrew, but what was your view? What are you hearing on the ground about the budget in these early stages? Take us through it, Greg.
Well, I think the first point is it is very much the early stage, and these budgets go through a bit of a set-piece project. They come out, there's an argy-bargy that goes in 2 stages. We have a community stage where people will come to the council on the 13th of May, and then a decision will be made a month later. So it's a bit of theatre, but I think the takeaway from this is that it's, we've got 3 councillors who stood on a rate freeze, and we've got a budget that's very similar to the budgets of old, where 95% of the council budget doesn't change from year to year because a lot of the costs are fixed. So people argue about, a tiny little segment of what council does, and that becomes emblematic of how the council stands. And the speeches at the meeting last night were a lot of people a number of councillors very proud of the things they've included, because the message they've heard is that people want social cohesion, they want to feel safer, and they want the place to look better. So more emphasis on...
I heard, Greg, that effectively the speeches that were made at the council meeting were like pitches for mayoralty. There was a few people there that were very much clearly pitching to be mayor. Did you pick up on that at all?
Well, I think there was an element of theatre in the motions, that the way people supported the motion, where they said the things that they've advocated for. So they were like leadership speeches. So yeah, they were pitches about how they'd influenced it. Now that may or may not be legitimate, but that's what they were doing. So
and I guess there's a number of people out there at the moment asking, well, where is the influence? Because this council plan is there's a lot of the more of the same in this document that was in the previous one, Andrew.
Yeah, look, I'm not seeing any new direction. I'm not seeing any great change in council direction under this council compared to previous councils. If you compare it to, say, the city of Yarra, when they first got elected, they made some whopping big changes early on and drastically changed the direction that their council was heading. There was lots of media around that omnibus bill put up by the new mayor of the city of Yarra. You're not seeing any of that here in Port Phillip. If you just to go into the detail of some of what's in there, one thing I went through line by line was the parking fees. I know a big focus of this council has been community safety and revitalisation of an area like Fitzroy Street. Well, if you look at the parking fees in Fitzroy Street, in winter next year, council will be putting up the parking fees on Fitzroy Street by 8% per day and 12.5% per hour. How is that consistent with their desire to see a more active and a safer and a more highly visited and utilised Fitzroy Street? Luckily, in summer, they're only putting the parking fees on Fitzroy Street up 5%. Ackland Street, the all-day rate is going up by 7.7% to $19.50 all year round, and a foreshore parking permit per day across the entire foreshore, excluding Waterfront Place and Elwood, is going up 8% to $20 year round. So that's why when you see the parking fee line item in the budget there, Marcus, it's going up by 7.7%, because there's some large increases, particularly around St Kilda. There's no parking fee rise whatsoever for Waterfront Place and Station Pier, and minimal rises around St Kilda Road in South Melbourne. It seems to be St Kilda wearing the brunt of all the parking fee increases across the entire city. It's not just the parking
so any
fees,
other comments?
The tradies rate is going up by 21%. The musicians parking permit is going up by 8.7%. South Melbourne Market, the parking fee for the first hour on a weekend after 10 p.m, because the first 2 hours is free, is going up 50%, and then 25% for the second hour. On a non-market day, the first hour is going up 50% and 25% in the second hour. And I know these fees are not set directly by council, but they are set by the South Melbourne Market Committee. But two councillors sit on that South Melbourne Market Committee, Marcus, so they must have approved this. And
they do.
The final decision was made by councillors last night to put fees up 50% and 25% at the South Melbourne Market. So
let's just go through. I'm interested, Greg, to get your thoughts on the politics of it and what happened at the meeting, because you were the only one that was watching in detail. But here's a couple of other observations I've got also. Big projects, and there's very large adjustments to big projects. I think the South Melbourne market budget is now over $30 million. When I first saw that compliance works budget, it was $14 million. That's an enormous increase. We need to start seeing a rejig of that project in terms of whether or not we're actually getting value, because there's a lot you can do with $30 million. You could probably build a new building for that now. So we're not necessarily replacing the market, but in the York Street car park, etc. There's a number of things you could do at opportunity cost. We've seen the South Melbourne Town Hall blow out, probably because of the asbestos. I'm not 100% sure. No new money for Fisherman's Bend Gymnastics Club. No money for men's mental health. A couple of key mental health initiatives across the board have been excluded. And still, I don't understand why we're paying $400,000 on car leases that were meant to be taken out of the budget by now. It's a pet peeve of mine, but why are we paying $400,000 a year to rent cars when you've got almost $200 million in the bank? It's asinine. Though that finance company doesn't need the money. There's some numbers that were surprising to me, wasn't in there. But this budget's interesting to reflect on from a numbers point of view. But Greg, take us through what the behind the scenes action is from a political point of view and the relationships on council.
Well, a lot of we've seen this trend where the council does more stuff behind closed doors now. They've met less. They have more unanimous decisions. So obviously decisions are being made behind closed doors. So we're not privy to all of that. But, I think we've got a situation here where one of the councillors has reduced their participation in the process for reasons that they haven't made public. So that's Councillor Betty J. She wants to ring me up, let me know, I'll write about it. But she's not seem to be participating in the process.
And if you're watching us now, Councillor, feel free to chuck a comment in the Facebook or YouTube comments chat. We love getting interaction from you. So feel free, anyone that's online, to make a comment, and we'll share that also. I've also got the minutes on the screen, which you might want to run through, Greg.
Well, I don't really... Well, the most important one is on the next page. So you've got this is...
So to those of you that are listening that can't see the screen, we've got the minutes of last night's council meeting up, and the budget is divided into 5 or 6 votes, 5 votes in this case. So it's different items such as the rate rise are in different parts and different spending initiatives, etc. So there's 5 votes to pass the budget. And Greg, take us through how those 5 votes went last night.
Well, in all the votes, Betty J has abstained. So that's the first thing. Now, the motion to introduce it was fairly set piece, but there's a sub-motion about the 3% rate increase, and everyone's voted for that except Councillors Harding and Mears and Councillor J, who's abstained. So they've given speeches about how their starting point was a rate freeze, so they couldn't support this part of the budget. But they've gone on to support other parts of the budget. So they've made a point that this is still the people's budget and the people have got another month to talk about it. Now, the other councillors have, they look pretty happy. They look like the cats that got the cream, really. They're happy about cutting the St Kilda Festival. Councillor Buckingham said that she thought it could have gone further. And it was intimated by other councillors that we're looking at a St Kilda Festival 2.0 in 27, so something quite different. So it's clearly out of favour. And what's in favour is things that are about social cohesion, about community safety, and the look of the city. So, it's surprising to be at a council meeting where people are spruiking, $200,000 of extra street cleaning like it's revolutionary. So I think, you have to take a deep breath and think about that. Now, why is that a revolutionary thing? So, when you get into the detail,
but particularly when you're talking about a budget that's $286 million.
Yeah, which has a cash surplus of 500,000. So,
yes, which is very tight.
And is 38,000 words. So, you and I can't give a commentary on it today, but this is a situation where this budget was well underway before these councillors got elected.
One of the other interesting things also that you mentioned before is the meetings that have been cancelled. So there's been 2 council meetings cancelled, which I guess there's nothing in principle wrong with that in terms of saving money, etc. But they have spent a lot of time behind the scenes working on this council plan, as they should. And there was a lot of anticipation from a lot of people. And I think now you've got single member wards. There's a lot more pressure on individual councils to deliver for their wards. And we're starting to see that in terms of the commentary and the speeches on the night, in terms of what we saw last night. What do you think is going to change with this budget, Greg or Andrew, as the consultation goes through?
I think they've got to review the parking fees. You can't just keep putting the parking fee burden onto St Kilda year after year after year. I know none of the other councillors want to particularly increase fees in their areas, but it's not fair that St Kilda wears the brunt of all the parking fees, particularly when there are some shopping strips in St Kilda that could do with a bit of revitalisation around now, compared to some of the shopping strips in other parts of the municipality, which appear to be doing much better but are not burdened by parking fees at the moment. So I think that will be reviewed by councillors, and hopefully they come back with a more equitable outcome in that area.
Greg?
Well, I come from this week in St Kilda, so I'm a little bit biased. But I think you had seen that St Kilda's often been being seen as the problem child, but now it might be the neglected child. So more will be revealed. We'll see what people have to say about that.
Yes, and it does, and this has been done over 10, 20 years, but these financials are very good and very, very healthy. It's a credit to lots of people that they've got themselves in this situation, but this is they've inherited probably one of the best sets of numbers of any council in Victoria, I'd say. So they've got a lot of latitude that they can work with. And this budget is the envy of many people, particularly regional and rural councils across Victoria. You've got a healthy surplus, a healthy increase, fantastic balance sheet. So there's a lot here that they can do.
Marcus, even if you compare it to some of our neighbouring councils, where Stonington have $60 or $70 million worth of debt, Yarra have $60 or $70 million worth of debt, City of Melbourne has $200 million worth of debt, City of Port Phillip had $150 million in the bank, and then we went and bought a parcel of land in Port Melbourne, which reduced that down to about $110 million. So we've actually got money in the bank, where all these other councils are carrying enormous debt on their books. And I go back to 2012 when I first got elected. We inherited a very healthy set of books from the council that was there before us. The council from the previous 4 years passed on a very healthy budget to the 2012 council, and that's continued all the way through. And we've all been beneficiaries over the last 20 years of healthy budgets from the previous council. We haven't gone into debt the way some of our neighbouring municipalities have been in order to fund their projects.
And that we're under significant pressure from a number of community groups who now seem to be very quiet about it.
Now, guys,
let's go through that.
Before we go on to your legacy, what do you think? What's your legacy of your council? What are people going to remember the councils that you were on for?
Miss Garbage Collection, number one.
Yeah, we forgot to collect the bins. That's probably it.
Yeah, the garbage collection stuff up. What else?
What
Internal politics.
thing that you did?
Oh,
seriously.
Let's not go around this game, because councillors that play this stuff are bullshit. Like Andrew and I are in the past now. It doesn't matter what we did, to be frank. We can talk about what we did and individual things, but frankly, politics is a team sport, and that's exactly what these councillors are going to learn now. You can be one vote, You can be 2 votes, you can be 3 votes, but at the end of the day, you need 5 votes to get something done. In my experience, it's always very easy to get 5 votes to spend money. It's very difficult to get 5 votes not to spend money. And this is a budget that continues that tradition of increasing council expenditure. And
it's very much a progressive Port Phillip budget, Marcus, was my first view when I read it. If you said, is this a progressive Port Phillip budget or is this a ROP budget, a ratepayers of Port Phillip budget? It's very much a progressive Port Phillip budget. I can't see any ROP influence in this budget whatsoever, if I'm frank and honest. And
Greg, we're 25 minutes in.
As Greg alluded to, if one of the ROP councillors has withdrawn from conversations on the budget, well, that probably shows in this budget outcome.
Greg, we're 25 minutes in. You get the final word on the budget.
Well, I think that's fantastic, your analysis there, Andrew. But I think you were closer to the fact earlier on, is that where's the themes in this? What does this council stand for? And is it clear? And I'm not sure that it is. So more will be revealed.
And keep in mind, it's 350 pages, so it's one hell of a read. But at the end of the day, it will be up to these 9 councillors to work out what comes, how the council reacts to the numerous amounts of community feedback that will come in over the next few weeks. So public consultation on the City of Port Phillip budget runs from April 17 to May 18. You can speak directly to council at the special meeting that will take place on May 13. And the final budget vote is on June 23rd, only less than a week before the financial year actually commences. Gentlemen, let's move on from the budget. Let's now talk about what's happening in the federal election. Greg, tell us about your event that you're holding this week and what you're hearing on the ground.
Well, Tuesday night, hottest ticket in town, sold out event at the Memo Hall with the Liberal, Labor and Greens candidate. And I think that'll be one of the few events in this campaign where they're all at. So that's something to look forward to. Bernadine Voss is going to be the chairperson, and I'm expecting a ding-dong discussion.
What are you hearing on the ground, Greg?
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? I'm not in the business of predictions, but, I've been talking to people in the know in the Jewish community, and, I've been told that there's a lot of dissatisfaction with Josh, but we don't know how that's going to play out in the voting. That at the debate or the forum that was held at the Temple Beth Israel with Benson and Josh, there was a lot of love in the room for Benson, but we don't know whether that will translate to a vote. On the other hand, we've got questions about whether the Greens will lose any voters for the people who, in the Jewish community, who are not that happy about the Greens' stance on Palestine. So where they will go, we don't know. And it's so finely tuned. So this seat could change hands if 1,000 people change their vote. So it won't necessarily go Liberal, but it could go Green. So,
Greg, congratulations on getting on the work you do. A lot of people don't see this, but you saw the Twist newsletter up there, and please, we encourage you to go to Twist. It's the best coverage of City of Port Phillip news, definitely, but also local news and events in St Kilda. Greg always says I don't give him a big enough plug, so that plug is now done. Now, but what it does mean is your event is packed. And most of these debates have been packed, which in previous years, well, apart from the South Bank one, I think that was pretty a bit light on, but perhaps they're a bit electioned out with the City of Melbourne election, which was pretty intense. Why do you think so many people are interested in coming along?
Well, because people haven't seen Benson, so they want to get a look at him up front. That it is a ding-dong competition between the Greens and Labor. And it's, at a time where people they're uncertain, they're searching for leadership. They're looking for local leadership as well. And it's an unpredictable result. It's an unpredictable event. So it's not as set piece as normal.
Andrew, take us through your views. What's going to happen in Macnamara in 2025?
It's probably going to be very interesting because the big news this week, of course, was Josh Burns announcing he was going to run an open ticket. So if the
Just
scenario
explain that for everybody.
Well, it means he's only going to put out a ticket that says vote one Josh and then fill the rest in yourself. From a Liberal point of view, it would have been nice to see him say, I'm going to put the Greens last, but he couldn't quite bring himself to do that. So he's gone with the open ticket option. What people will do with their preferences and how many people follow the ticket, I guess we'll find out. And if the scenario occurs where Josh falls into third place, it could be very telling where Josh's preferences go, whether they get the Liberal elected or the Green elected. So that was the big news this week. The Liberals have put out their ticket, which has the Greens last, and the Greens have put out their ticket, which still has Josh second. So it's going to be very interesting there what happens with the distribution of preferences in the event Josh Burns falls into third place. This week we saw a few announcements from all the candidates. There were a couple of sports clubs were promised money this week from the Liberals. There was $500K for Elwood Pavilion and all the sporting clubs that are based out of there. There was $1.4 million for Northport Oval, so the Port Melbourne Football Club and Port Melbourne Cricket Clubs both getting some money to improve their facilities up there. Josh announced $1.5 million for community safety in and around St Kilda this week, which was more than Benson's announcement of $500,000 a few weeks ago. I haven't been able to locate any detail on what exactly that $1.5 million is going to be spent on, but it's, as a headline announcement, it's pretty impressive. Josh has announced $4.3 million for the Windsor Childcare Centre, whereas Benson hasn't announced anything yet. And I think the Greens are supporting the Windsor Childcare Centre also. Benson, today I saw him put out an announcement about anti-hooning cameras for Beach Road, which I thought was a very interesting announcement, given there was a post about a week or two ago from Councillor Rod Hardy announcing that the state government via the EPA had walked away from the noise camera trial for the state. So I'm not sure what the status of that trial is and how a federal government can come along and do something in that area with the announcement today. We've seen both Josh and Benson are funding a new or replacement synagogue in Ripon Lee, and Josh has announced $18 million for the Jewish Arts Quarter. I haven't seen a lot that's specifically local to Port Phillip or our local area from the Greens in the past few weeks that I've been able to find. And the numbers that count, Marcus, I always follow the money. With the bookies on Sportsbet, Josh has gone from $1.90 out to $2.05, and he's now back into $1.91, which is higher than his odds were at the last election. Last election, he was $1.72 into $1.60. Benson's gone from $7 into $5 over a fortnight, but this week is now out to $5.75. And the Greens have been largely unchanged. They've gone from $2.20 to $2.30 to $2.40 in the last fortnight. There hasn't been much change there with the Greens also. So that's where the money is if anyone wants to make a small investment on the short-term high-risk money market.
Okay,
kids
now
at home, do not gamble. Do not gamble. Kids at home.
Another cash announcement was just been announced of $12.5 million from Labor to ANAP.
Oh, all right.
So did they already commit to that? Well, on top of the additional $12 million they've already got?
Well, I got an email from ANAM announcing it today, so I don't know whether it's
okay. I'm not sure if that's new money because that's the existing federal government commitment. So maybe they're just recommitting to existing money, but it could be new money. Don't know. That's interesting.
Well,
Paul Keating and Jeff Kennett's baby that was. Yeah. Okay. Good. Heard it here first. Thank you, Greg. Greg, any predictions or gossip on the campaign trail?
No, this is the headline. It says, today Tony Burke announced it, 12.5 million towards ANAM. This is in addition to the 12.5 million announced in 2019.
That's 25 all up.
Yeah, so it's 25 all up.
And that's come from the Labor Party, which is a big deal because the Liberal Party, Mitch Fifield, when he was arts minister some time ago and committed under the Morrison government to the – no, actually it was under the Turnbull government. It was that long ago. Committed to the 12 million. So, okay, good to see some new money there for the South Melbourne Town Hall.
So the Greens are prepared to equal it, they say.
Of course they are. When does pre-poll start?
It starts on Tuesday. It's
all right.
Very first day.
We'll cover more of Macnamara in the next couple of weeks or so, but I don't think there's been a campaign in Macnamara for a very long time where we've seen the Prime Minister and Peter Dutton crisscross the electorate so much, particularly more towards the Elsternwick, Ripponlea, Caulfield end. But it's there's a lot of money and promises that have been committed into the electorate, and it's getting a lot of attention. One thing I would say, nobody probably is that interested in my opinion anyway, but the one thing I would say is I think the tectonic plates of this seat, like many seats, have shifted, and it's going to be difficult to predict. You've got some data points that show the Greens vote at the South Pack end of the electorate is increasing year on year on year. Caulfield has completely changed now with the dynamics from a foreign policy point of view, and everywhere you drive is a Benson sign. The campaign is very different. It's they're both focusing on all spectrum of issues, from local council issues to state issues, the noise attenuation type things that you were talking about before, Andrew, very much a state government issue, and then foreign policy and foreign affairs issues. So it's a very unique seat. It'll be an interesting result, but one thing you can say is I think the sitting member is feeling the heat a bit, and he's a bit nervous. Let's do the final roundup now. Go on, Greg.
Well, I think if it's worth looking at the recording of the debate at the Temple Beth Israel, where Josh had to put the case to say that he wasn't worried about the Liberals, he was worried about the Greens, and which
I thought was a very telling question. In fact, we should have brought it up and played it here, right? Maybe we should do this in more detail. So the first question Josh Burns got out of the gates, which is a hard one, is why are you going to put the Greens last? And he I wouldn't say he didn't fumble through it, but he didn't have a concise answer, and he wasn't ready to answer the question. Which showed to me that's not the Josh Burns I know. I've known Josh since his political career started, formally anyway. And I know him, so I was a bit surprised by that. Then, as Greg said, in answer to one of the questions, he said Benson's a nice guy, but he's not going to win. He's not a realistic candidate. Which, if you're going to go, I think in political debate, the rules generally are go the party, go the policy, go the idea, but be very careful when you go the individual, particularly in a face-to-face debate, because you need to be 100% sure that you're right, and it's factually based. And I think he stumbled a bit from there on in terms of, he said the Greens will win because the Liberals can't. Therefore, if you're voting for the Liberal Party, you're giving the opportunity. That's what I heard. He didn't expressly say that, but that's kind of what he was saying. Vote for me, because if you don't, the Greens will get elected. Will have the potential to get elected. And Benson's reply to that was, Benson's a very calculated person. He's very what's the word? He's very congenial. He is well spoken, but he's very collective in his nature. And he was able to take that sort of loose ball that Josh gave and said, no. Josh gave rather, I can win, and then was able to state a very personal case in defence, which I thought was actually fairly good. But I thought Josh in that debate was a bit defensive, Greg.
Well, and also, there was the story that was in The Age a couple of weeks ago that they were going to run an open ticket. I got the mail today with the ticket. Now, the way that Australia Post works, you have to lodge that stuff 10 days ago to get it this week. So that decision was made a long time ago. So Josh has been sitting on that open ticket news for a long while, which what makes that debate at Temple Beth Israel so important.
So you're saying
I guess he
knew...
was waiting for the Greens to print their ticket before he announced what he had printed on his ticket.
Well, they were never going to do an open ticket. But look, Josh is, I personally don't think it's a big deal because Josh is accepting the reality that in all the people's, in this educated community, people aren't going to follow tickets slavishly. They're going to think about where their vote goes. And there's lots to think about here that's specially related to Gaza and the Middle East. That's, it's counterintuitive that would be a negative for Josh, but it is. So,
and I can't find one of his signs in Caulfield. I go to Caulfield quite a lot, in terms of taking kids to school, etc. I wouldn't say Caulfield necessarily, but I go through that end of the electorate a lot, and there's hardly any signs. I saw one on Inkerman Street, a big one on Inkerman Street for Josh. There's Liberal signs everywhere, which again, it's only one end of the electorate, don't get me wrong. But I saw Josh at a tram stop the other day. His supporters weren't wearing Labor colours. He wasn't wearing them. His board has the Labor logo in white. There's only a little line at the bottom that's red. It's I wouldn't say he's necessarily playing it down. Maybe that's how he rides, but I think he's feeling. It's fair to say he's feeling the heat.
Well, I reached out to a well-known journalist in the Jewish community here, and I wanted that person to write me a story on the nuances within the Jewish community because, it's a diverse community. They don't all have the same idea. It's wrong to say there is a Jewish vote. So I wanted to get some nuance. And this person said, well, I can't write it for you because there is no nuance, that people are overwhelmingly pissed off. They don't think he's done enough. Now, but
do you think Albo's done enough or Josh or both?
Beg your pardon?
They don't think who's done enough.
Oh, that Josh through the government. So,
right.
It's Josh is the lightning rod for discontent with the Australian diplomatic position. But when I said, well, does that mean that people will change their vote? And this person said, well, we'll not know. That people may not decide until they get in the booth whether they can actually vote against a Jewish MP.
I was going to say the question here, Greg, and you've almost touched on it, is whilst the Jewish community might be really pissed off with the current federal government and annoyed that Josh hasn't done enough to influence their position, when they get in the polling booth, will they still vote for one of their own? And that's going to be the question we'll find out here is, they quite happily over the years in Caulfield have turned up and voted for David Southwick in the state and Michael Danby and Josh Burns in the federal. And they were all quite comfortable having one from each party because they were both Jewish MPs. Now, will that continue in this election is the question we will find out in about 3 weeks' time is, will they continue to vote for a Jewish MP despite being annoyed at his party's position? And I guess we'll find that out.
The one person we haven't heard a lot about, I haven't spoken to Greg, etc., is the Greens candidate. Give us a bit of colour on the Greens candidate, please. You're the only person here that can do that, I think.
Well, experienced, learned a lot in her last campaign, very good communicator, got a great machine, got really good messages worked out, sharp wit, she's got a lot going for her. And she's delivered at the climate change debate. It was a masterclass on how to get your messages in to be a, inverted commas, smiling assassin, because all her messages were things that Josh could do nothing about. You know, she emphasised her family, and what does she say to her kids about climate change? About the fact that she's a busy mother. You want something done, you ask a busy mother to do it. So all this sort of stuff was really clever and sincere. So, and also they've got a great field force. The Greens field force is.
Well, I was about to ask you what sort of campaign do you think the Greens have actually run on the ground this time? They used to run very good campaigns with Steph Hodgins-May, I think.
Well, I think it's a continuation of that, and they're using her Senate incumbency and Kat Copsey's incumbency, and experienced people like the campaigners from the state election. So they've rolled on from the local by-election campaign. So they're match fit. Well and truly.
Keep in mind the council election results for the Greens were devastating, and in terms of the end result, they didn't get a councillor elected in the city of Port Phillip. Did they get one in Glenara, Andrew?
I can't think of one immediately, no.
And the primary votes were down as well. So regardless of look at the electoral system. So look, this election will be interesting. And it's very difficult to predict. But one thing I would say is, to Greg's point, I reckon there's going to be a lot of very intentional voters in Macnamara, which it hasn't necessarily had the reputation in the past of being that seat. You've got to keep in mind the Liberals won Paran, which overlays a small amount of this electorate only months ago. And cost of living is a big issue in a big chunk of this area. So is housing affordability, which are issues that we haven't spoken about here tonight, but I think they're being discussed at kitchen tables such as mine and across the electorate. Greg finishes off and we'll go through some general news.
Well, watch this space. And I think, to be honest, I think the grey Greens and the Jewish Greens are a challenge, that they could leak away from the Greens, but where do they go? I don't know. So because we don't have the normal run of independents that we have this time. We've really only got minnows, right, conservative minnows versus the main three.
And those of you looking at your screens, you'll see just how close the 2022 election result was here between these three parties. The Liberal Party was on the nose of that election, and we had some candidate issues. Well, the Liberal Party had some candidate issues here in Macnamara, but 29% with the Liberal Party coming in third. I think they're going to substantially improve on that vote, would be my prediction. Greens at 29.7%, and the Labor Party came in just ahead of the Greens at 31.8%. I think the likely scenario is Greens potentially stay the same or come back. Liberal Party goes up, Labor Party goes backwards. And if that does happen, that would be a very interesting scenario. But you would say the Greens, the Liberal Party, to be within shooting distance of victory needs to be in the low 40s. And then we have to see who is the party that distributes the preferences upwards. So it's going to come down to the wire potentially, but it's too early to predict this one, I would suggest. But most professional pundits are saying that the Labor Party should get back in because the preferences won't flow to the Liberal Party, and they assume that Josh Burns will come in at the second position, I would suggest. But we'll look into that in more detail. Now, I've been away for a few weeks, gentlemen, so what have we missed in Port Phillip gossip? What have you got for me? We talked previously about the missing council meetings. Greg, start us off. You've done some great reporting on Carlisle Street. You've done some great reporting on the St Kilda Marina. Where do you want to start? You've got all the gossip.
Well, I do think that the Carlisle Street is a big deal with the decision about Coles, because the background is we've got two supermarkets set to redevelop on that street and we don't know what's happening. And currently there's a negotiation with Coles, and there's going to be a town hall meeting in May to brief the community about the negotiations. So it's kind of being done we're doing it now behind closed doors. Now we'll talk to you about it later. So that's
And
pretty interesting.
do you know what the mood on the ground is in terms of, it was a bit of an election issue, but councillors are obviously jumping on top of this, but what's the mood on the ground with the average Joe around Carlisle Street? Are they concerned about this?
Well, I think they're nervous. And, I've heard the traders think it's painfully slow. They want to know why they're waiting, because a lot of the problems in Carlisle Street is that people don't know where to invest in it. Do you try and put more effort into it, only to have it change on you in ways that you don't know? And even if it goes to the best scenario, things are 5 and 10 years away. So there's a feeling amongst the traders that it's like watching paint dry, grass grow. It's pretty horrendous. And then other people, of course, don't want it to be rushed. So
I would say Libby Buckingham and Councillor Halliday are not letting the grass grow under their feet, though, Greg. They're jumping all over the top of it in terms of making sure they're in front of the discussion.
Well, I think that it's still a big black box. I used a graphic of 2 elephants fighting, with that old African saying that when elephants fight, the grass gets quashed. So we're the grass. So the next thing is, which I think comes up from this quote here, I also did an interview this week with the Chief Inspector Brett Clove from the St Kilda Police about the roundtable. And
good timing on that, because we've just had a comment online also asking us to talk about what's happened to the roundtable and safety. So we want to hear about the interview, Greg, but just take us through what's actually going on as well.
Well, all the organisations involved have until the 4th of April to get back with submissions, and all those submissions are coming in. And then in May, Ian Gray's going to put a report to council. I think it's on the 23rd of May. But everyone's secret squirrel about it. They're not talking about what they're going to put in their submissions for. So having an interview with the police was quite an insight into where they're coming from. Now, the inspector, the local commander, was very enthusiastic about it. He spoke in the highest terms about it. He said, I wish we could do this quarterly, that there's been things that have come out of it that have never come out before. So, and he's a matter-of-fact chap. So I was impressed by that. But the key message he wanted to get across was that he thought that the community sector didn't really understand the disaffection within the community about safety, because their business is to look after their clients. So they're in a kind of defensive mode, and they hadn't really understood how much it was affecting council and the police. Because when you see an encampment on the street, you don't ring Launch Housing, you ring the police or the council. And so that there was a disconnect. But he felt that people got that message and that they all had to work together to really get things to happen on the ground so that people could move on from the community safety things onto being a cohesive community.
And Greg, talking about moving on, did the police feel that they're now getting on top of the problem and the problem's getting better, or is it getting worse?
Oh, no, better. So, look, basically their line was that their data shows that things are about the same. But what's happened is that places like the Gatwick have closed. There's been a lot of other gentrification. So what used to happen in behind closed doors is now happening in the street. So you can see it. But they already knew it was there. But it's now right out in the open. So they're dealing with that and the community complaints about that and what they do about it. But they're under no illusion that it's a hard job. And they don't think the local laws as they stand support the job. But the fact that he kept on talking about the foundation issue. And the foundation issue is that it's about social issues and community rights rather than crime. So it's very interesting, but I won't be publishing the story until about 10 days.
Okay, right. So don't expect that in tomorrow's twist. Andrew, what are you hearing on the ground about community safety or anything else in the city of Port Phillip? Take us through it.
Look, there's been that. I know it has gone quiet about the roundtable, but Ian Gray has been very active. I'm hearing that he's probably going to make some recommendations that councillors may not necessarily all accept. They've commissioned an expert to give him some recommendations, and then councillors are possibly going to not accept all of those recommendations and do their own thing. So that's going to be an interesting little outcome to watch here. I find Greg's comments interesting about the police, where the police saying the community services probably don't realise the level of dissatisfaction with their performance over the last few years and the impact they're having on the community. I think the police probably need to realise that also, that it's not just the local services that the community's finding unsatisfactory. It's the police that the local community is finding unsatisfactory and the police response. I still hear time and time again, I rang the police and no one turned up. We rang the police an hour ago and no one turned up when I had an issue. So that's something that I don't think the local inspector can palm off to the local community groups. It's something he's got to deal with himself, that there is still a feeling amongst the community that the police do not respond and will not respond when they are called. And that's something only he can fix. He can't push that onto the local service organisations and for them to come up with a solution to that.
Anything else you got for us? Oh, sorry, go on, Greg.
He did say he was significantly under-resourced, but that's a statewide problem, not just...
absolutely, but that doesn't mean he can then push his issues or the perception of his issues onto the local service organisations or onto the local council and think that his lack of resources is going to be fixed by a change to council's local law.
Well, I don't think that's what he's saying. He's saying it's got to be a team effort, but we always say that, yeah. But, wait until you read the article.
Well done for getting the
Looking
interview.
forward to it.
That's, well done for getting the interview. That's a big deal in itself. Anything else to talk about, Greg?
Well, only the ongoing saga of the marina and how...
Let's talk about that briefly.
Well, we've lost a decade there. It's back to the drawing board. It's cost a bomb. The council says it's cost $1.6 million. And, I think if that was the case, that's a miracle. So, but they're not interested in having an independent review of it. And I think, well, in whose interest is it not to have a review? It spans 3 councils, 6 mayors. You guys are involved, all sorts of stuff. We do need an independent review.
My view, an independent review would just be throwing good money after bad. It all...
But you're going to do it again, Andrew. We're going to do that. They're going to recommission the same sort of idea again. So an independent review, isn't going to cost a bomb compared to what the next one will cost.
Yeah, look, Andrew and I are a bit tired on what we can say about the commercials of it. What I would say is this, that the public evidence and everything that's in the public domain indicates that this has not gone well. We can re-prosecute what the votes were and all that sort of stuff, but to make ourselves look better, but that's not going to help the situation. It's a prime asset, which has very difficult commercial considerations to it: seasonality, toxic soil, physical area, planning constraints. Councillors decided to delegate their responsibility to a community panel that came up with something that was uneconomic. And surprise, somebody hasn't been able to make it economically viable. It should be no surprise to anybody.
Yeah, but they're going to do it again. They're going to go through the same cycle.
Yeah, which I think is a problem. I don't think, to Andrew's point, I don't think a review is going to solve it. Councillors, with all the debacle over the garbage non-collection, I was a big proponent to say I wanted an independent review because I didn't think that council could be trusted to do its own review and get the right answers out there. And you need to rebuild trust with the community. The difference between that and this is 7,000 bins didn't get picked up and everyone noticed. There's still not a lot of interest, unfortunately, in the St Kilda Marina. And this stuff up will probably, I wouldn't say be covered up. That's not happening at all, but it just doesn't have the community interest, which is really sad because it's an important community asset that deserves better. And to your point, Greg, it's probably needs a substantial change in process to get a better outcome.
Yeah,
thanks for joining us tonight.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us tonight, everybody. I've just looked up the pre-poll locations for the federal election. St Kilda Lifesaving Club is one, which is a bit of a surprise to me. Tuesday, April 22 to Thursday, April 24, Saturday, April 26, Monday, April 28 to Thursday, May 1, and then also Friday, May 2, and then Saturday, May 3. But have a look at the AEC website if you're looking for that. I'm just looking at some others. There's also St Stephen's Church in Brighton, and St George's Anglican Church, which from memory where it was last time is in Malvern, which is in the city of Kooyong. So they finally got they finally got a decent pre-poll location for Macnamara. St Kilda Lifesaving Club, 34 Jacker Boulevard. The reason I say it's decent is you can get a park across the road there on the triangle.
And it's only going to cost you $7 an hour to park to go and vote, Marcus.
That's it, unless you've got a foreshore permit. On the city of Port Phillip, and
which is also going up 4%.
I don't think there's disabled parking out the front of that building either. But it's good to see the St Kilda Lifesaving Club being used because it hasn't been used the way it should have been for a very long time. But that's another story as well. Gents, we've had a long one. We've had a long one tonight. I appreciate your comments. Some people will love this episode. Others will find it a bit boring. Sorry, I was just reading the comments coming through. We enjoy putting these together. This one, if it's going to be the most boring episode of the year, this is going to be it. The budget's complex. The budget is difficult. We do our best to unpack it. Andrew and I are the ghost of councillors past, so we've always got a bit of an edge. So apologies for that. We do know a lot of councillors watch this and a lot of council staff watch it. So they would understand the edge that we feel, particularly former councillors. But we do our very best to give you some information that you would normally read in the local newspaper that doesn't exist anymore, and it cuts through some of the crap and noise that you read on social media. We know a little bit about what goes on. We don't know everything. And if you've got any gossip for us, as always, please feel free to send it through. hello@marcuspell.com. If you want it to be confidential, give it to Greg. Don't give it to Andrew, would be my suggestion. But Greg, how can people get a little bit of council information off to you if they need to?
I just go to the TWISC website, just put TWISC St Kilda in Google, and you'll find my email address, and you can go from there.
Also, a bit of news on this show is we'll professionalise in the next couple of weeks, and I'll start turning this into a podcast. We've been doing, I think this is our sort of 6th episode, so we've ironed it out a bit more. We're trying to do the format as professionally as we can based on the limited budget we have, but we'll try and increase the frequency and the professionalism and then start pumping it out on some different channels. So thank you, everybody that watches this. Marcus? It's pretty cheap. Pretty cheap. We did get a sponsorship deal that allowed me to buy a microphone, but that's been about it so far. We do it for love, not the money.
I will see a lot of you on Tuesday night.
I will see you there Tuesday night, Greg, because I bought a ticket.
Yeah, I will see you there on Tuesday night, but I didn't buy a ticket, so I'm going to walk in.
Yeah. You bought a free ticket, Andrew.
Yes, I did. I did.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Greg, for putting that on. Will it be live streamed?
Yes, live streamed and then put on the Twisk website in the
And I
day
heard a
after.
serious rumour that Sky News were coming.
They are indeed. They're very
They are
excited
coming?
about it. No, they're very excited about it. They have to decide on the night.
Will Peter
So-
Krivlin be there?
Would that be a bonus for you? No,
I was hoping Paul Murray. Always wanted to have a beer with him.
Now you're blushing now, Marcus.
Thanks for joining the program tonight. I appreciate it. I'm not blushing at all. I'm not taking that bait one iota. Good luck for Tuesday, Greg. Good luck for Sky News, who's going to be there. And at ABC, if you're watching, you should probably be there as well. We'll see you again in 2 weeks' time. And if you've got any questions or comments or complaint or hate mail, please send those to me, hello@marcuspell.com or 0478 136 762.